It's actually a pleasure and always honor to be at TED because of the vibrancy and the energy in the place, and I can definitely feel it. And thanks again for getting the name right, because most of the Texans usually get it as AJ, so well, that's a good one. But with that, I think it's a really interesting time to be an entrepreneur in India, and I can confidently say that being or becoming an entrepreneur is a very, very deep, profound spiritual journey that whoever has gone through, and I'm sure Piyush echoes the same thought, Ishita echoes the same thought, and the rest of the speakers would as well. So there are two parts to what I'll talk about: how and what I did to what I started, and what is it that we're exactly doing. So it gives you a better perspective of things that we are doing. I lived in the US for about 10 years, went to BITS Pilani here in Rajasthan, so that's a fairly rural area. And then I was convinced when I left for the US that I did not belong to this country. And when I was there is when I realized that there was something clearly missing. I wanted to do something which was truly substantial, something that added value to myself, and I made a difference. So with that, everyone goes through a journey. For me, it started out in a business strategy class at University of Pennsylvania, where I was thinking that this is a predominantly Indian audience, but for those who don't understand, something that we read in business strategy class in The Art of War, which said, disconnect with your emotions in the heat of the battle. And I asked my professor at that time, the business strategy professor, I said, how do you disconnect yourself emotionally? He said, well, you just do it. And that is when I began to think, even this guy, one of the best business schools, can't really tell me how to disconnect from the emotions. There's clearly something missing, right? And that is where I began to think and start the journey which led me to HarVa. These are interesting times, and I say that because more often than not, I come across people who want to give back to the society, who want to really do something interesting. And again, for sake of reference, I sort of took it as the spiritual evolution of man in the 4 yugas that the Indian mythology talks about. So the Satyug, Dwapar, Treta, Kalyug, and essentially what you see in Satyug, people were very anthric. So they were essentially self-contained. Nothing really bothered them. And at that time, what they did in terms of charity was truly charity. What we are doing in Kalyug today is totally materialistic. This is sort of yantric, which is, I believe more in my laptop than I believe in myself. And if I really want to give back, it's in terms of CSR. So if you've seen around the world, most of the people, when they talk about charity is about giving selflessly, but mostly it's out of guilt, because you have this deep-seated feeling that you've got something which the other person does not have. So it's the guilt that's driving you to give it. But you really, when you do charity, you don't really go out and publish it in newspaper articles. You don't talk about it in public. And usually, when you give, it's about the other person accepting it. Because if the other person who you're giving it to does not accept it, clearly you've lost it, right? The guilt still stays. And so the giver is lower than the taker. Whereas in Kalyug, which is today, you typically give in form of CSR. So if I'm the guy, the company who's doing CSR, it's really about corporate social responsibility, and I'm the bigger guy, right? So I give it to a bunch of people, and I say, oh, by the way, this is for you. I'd like a banner for my company for the next 2 weeks on your hut, right? So it defeats the purpose. So having said that, this is something that made me really think, and I used to be a banker before this. One of the most interesting places that I went to was Dubai. We were doing a consulting assignment in Burj Al Arab, and I'm standing right there in front of these majestic fountains and fire, and you have emerald faucets and diamond shops bigger than the regular shops here. And the one thought that crossed my mind was, what does Prince Al Walid, who incidentally is one of the richest men in the world and also owns 4% of Citigroup, or he did back then, what does he eat when he's hungry, and what does he drink when he's thirsty? It's a fairly simple question, but changes your life. Because when you start thinking about it, at the end of the day, he eats the same bread and he drinks the same water. The only thing that separates him is the aspirational value that you assign to the cost of the product. So I might be buying a bottle of water for 12 rupees, but somebody else in this room who's a millionaire or a billionaire might be buying it for $30. There's nothing much different in that bottle of water. You might add some minerals, you might add something else, you might plate it with gold, but at the end of the day, it is water. So that, significantly changed the way I looked at things. And then I started to really sort of go deeper. When I was working with Citi, I was with consumer banking, and I ended up traveling India extensively. Before this, when I was in the US, I wasn't really given a chance to come back to India and be in the market because they felt that I wasn't really exposed to the Indian market, so I might not be able to do what required for Citigroup at that time. But fortunately, when I was here, the things that I noticed did not make sense. People are still talking about CSR, and in 2009, when I left Citi, you had 70,000 crores of debt that was written off by the government of India. The very next year, of course, there was elections. But the very next year after that, you had the largest IPO in MFI, the microfinance companies, in India. Does not make sense. You've just drained 70,000 crores. Why would you want to put another 10,000 crores when you don't have the people's ability to pay back? Didn't make sense. You're looking at large tracts of uncultivated land, and yet we're in a agrarian economy. You saw that we were going through double-digit food inflation in India till about 3 months ago, and yet none of the smart businessmen wanted to get into agriculture. There's different reasons for it, but it did not make sense to me. And incidentally, if you read Economic Times yesterday, suddenly the rural markets have become very unattractive for the urban companies because the deflation and the prices of products coming down, people don't want to tap that rural market. One of the very interesting statistics that I saw is that labor arbitrage is something that the BPO industry thrived on. Our Millennium City, Gurgaon, where I live, is actually booming in the fact that BPO industry started out there. But interestingly enough, the biggest problem they're facing today is attrition, which is about 200 to 300%. And yet you have unemployment as the biggest problem in rural India. Does not make sense to me again. If you look at insurance industry penetration in the past 70 years, and the who's who of insurance companies have been here from the world, is still less than 5%. You ask anybody from the insurance industry, why do you think it is that? The prompt answer is, well, because people don't understand. They need to be educated. Wrong. People are very smart. They know exactly what they want because, at the end of the day, it's about survival. They don't buy it because for a farmer in India, his land is far more important than his life. So what you really need to sell is not life insurance. You need to sell land insurance or crop insurance. Most importantly, I saw that in rural India, the average expense of a 5-people household is less than 10% of that of an urban Indian household. Sounds, bizarre, but I'm talking about as far as 30, 40 kilometers away. Because there is no goods that they buy. A Prada purse does not make any difference for them, right? You could sell a Colgate toothpaste tube, but they don't want to buy it because they don't need it. It's not that they're not educated. Once you start doing the math, you realize that most of these people would live off of the produce in their own farms. The land is their own. Electricity bills are not paid for. Taxes are unheard of. And voila, you have less than 10% expenses. Interestingly enough, in 2009, I saw this very interesting line from Jim Rogers. In 20 years, farmers will drive Ferraris and investment bankers will till the land. Clearly, I wasn't the only idiot here. And the picture is not very clear, but there I was, driving a tractor. Because I figured, that's where the real value was. So I invested, when I was in the US, I invested extensively in farmlands. And in my mind, historically, this is the first time in history of the world that the world population is growing at the slowest pace. So if I acquired 10 flats in urban cities, how many kids would I need to have to inherit them to? I mean, at most one, because most of the families are nuclear families. So what we really needed to invest in is farmlands, because what you saw back a few slides ago was that even Prince Al Walid would need to still eat the wheat. So you need to get better farming, better crops. And that's what made sense to me. And thus came out my organization called HarVa. It stands for Harnessing Value of Rural India. It is not about selling value to rural India. It is not about juicing value from rural India. It's really about harnessing value of rural India. And for that, I needed to create value in rural India. So what I started out doing is I went to the farmers and I started to discuss with them. Look, it doesn't make sense. What you're getting per capita, per acre, per month is clearly not what you need to be getting. You can get a lot better because there's clearly demand out there. People want to get organic produce. People want to get different kinds of cash crops. Are you doing anything about it? The clear answer that I'd get is, you know what, it's all great stuff that you're talking, but you're here only for a nice November sunny weekend because the weather is great. You'd probably sit here, have a couple of carrots and radishes, and then go away. But that's not what I was there for. So I tried to convince them, and I realized that it's impossible to get these guys to do what you want them to do because these guys are really living hand to mouth. Most of these guys are negative cash flows, right? They don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the access, they don't have the information to start cropping what they have to or what they need to. And then more importantly, even if they took that leap of faith believing some guy, they wouldn't have the market because that guy would disappear. So what we needed to do was really go out and start to set up a whole ecosystem. And that's when I thought, in order for me to be there, and I think Ishita would probably relate to it much more, when you're trekking up a mountain, what you need to do is set up base camps. If you don't have a base camp, there's no way you can stay there. And that's the same thing that goes in rural India, or for that matter, any other remote area. So I cannot just go there on one weekend and expect things to happen overnight, and then I come back 2 months later and people are following it. You need to be in constant touch. And that's something that we felt was not happening. Clearly, the farmers were not, there was a hard wall we weren't able to crack through. So what I started looking at was the homemaker and the caretaker, the household worker. And that's when I thought that what we needed was annuity-based income, right? Something to set up a base camp so that even if I'm not there, the value is constantly being created. And when I come back, there's some remnants of what I left there. And so I thought, BPO actually makes sense because that's what led to growth in Gurgaon and most of the urban cities. Why not try it over here? And so we called lots of people who wanted to work within the village, and invariably what we got is women, right? And this is something that we told the people who came. This lady was an 8th pass woman, 8th grade, and she wanted to work with us. We said, it's not really possible. You're probably not even aware of what this is. And she said, no, I'm really keen because I've heard you and I've seen what you do. I'm very keen to work on these computers with you guys. So the trainer said, great, this is a computer, just do what you want to. And there's something that she came back with after 4 hours, and something I can confidently say that most of you are not able to do. It's a miracle. What you realize is, this might be a simple thing, right? When they saw the computer, they did not ask me, what is this? They asked me, we have seen A, B, C, D. Why is this Q, W, R, T, Y? We were blank. We said, well, we don't know. Just figure it out. And that's what they did. And what was funny is that most of these women actually can recite the keyboard by heart, not just Q, W, R, T, Y, but all the exclamation signs and semicolons and whatnot. And they can actually be blindfolded and they can work on the computer. So what was interesting was, this is the innovation. This is really about not producing a software engineer to work on a computer, because a computer is really a black box now. So what you need to do is train the people to be able to get the job done. And that's what labor arbitrage is all about. So what we pitch to our clients on the BPO side is, so long as you can define your process, we can outsource it for you. And that's what we're doing. Great, so we figured that it was actually going to make sense. We went out and trained about 500 odd women across all these villages in Haryana. Most of the people who came across me, they said, why are you picking up Haryana? This is probably the most skewed in terms of sexual ratios, and it would make sense to go to South India because that's where you'd get more educated people. Well, then that would defeat the purpose, right? Because you're clearly going in the opportunity, and what I wanted to do was create value. So we started out, we trained about 500 women, and what we finally got was an all-women rural BPO. Yet, this is not about women empowerment. And this we say very emphatically because I don't stand for poverty alleviation, I don't stand for women empowerment, I don't stand for upliftment of the villages, because I feel the moment you say that, you've already disempowered them. Do it because it makes sense. That's when it'll be sustainable. Give the women a chance because they're more competent, and that's what they would be doing in the villages, not because you feel for them. I mean, that's great. Feel for them, do all those things, but don't really approach the problem that way. With that said, not really an easy task. Don't try this at home. But lots of problems. Electricity is clearly not one of the resources that is available in the villages. We came across problems like generators, setting it up there, and running the system. But eventually, what fascinated me about India is the ability to do jugaad. You know, do it on the fly. And trust me, if you're not able to do jugaad in India, things will not work. And that's what I stand by. So if I were to get 20 BMW engineers and get them to innovate on Tata Nano, we will not get the cheapest car. We might get the safest car, the fastest car, but we will not get the cheapest car. And by the way, Tata Nano is still not a success, because what they are competing is with jugaad, which is 1/4 the price, seats 3 times the people, and can be repaired just anywhere. And so that's what I wanted to go after, and we set up this all-women rural BPO in the villages that we are there. Okay, so with that said, what I wanted to do was set up something which was a self-sustainable value creation ecosystem that we could distribute across India, and so we wouldn't really have to specifically target different problems. So essentially about setting up a base camp, and what you see here, we essentially go to a village, we set up a proverbial hut, enable it with internet, get electricity connection, which is the generator that you saw there, and invariably, when we start to ask for people, we have mostly women coming in, and right now we have all women rural BPOs. Once we get the women, publicity is free of cost, right? And fortunately, what happens is, we realized, and I was speaking with one person here, student help desk is something which is right to education. So right to education, the government wants to implement, but it's impossible to go out there. Because you're standing right here in Delhi, you go 60 kilometers out to rural India, you ask that person, what is IIT Delhi? It's a blank. Forget Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. It doesn't even make a difference, right? So how do you implement that right to education without the people even having that access? So what we do is, because we have the women, we get the students, and we give them student counseling services in those help desks. Because we have the internet, we have the electricity. Secondly, we connect the farmers to farming help desks, because we've connected to the closest horticulture department or the Van Vibhag. It makes sense. Because we have the farmers' wives working there, we have all the confidence of the household. I mean, essentially, we have the household. So the farmers start to come to us, and we've experimented with different farmers, sort of coming over and asking us things about what they should do and how they should do it. Now, very interestingly, what I realized is India is the largest producer of milk. I was recently at a lunch, I met with the Danish ambassador, and he said, the work you're doing is phenomenal, but we'd like to associate with you. We'd like to get our dairy farmers and do something here. But the problem is I'm not able to get past the Delhi region. I said, great, I have a solution for you. If you were to take a Time magazine and show this farmer that, look, I know India is our largest producer of milk. This is a Time magazine study that says we need to produce more milk. Guess what his response is? Get out of the door. Because I'm going to sell my cows. I'm getting such a huge valuation for my land. I'm getting out, and I'm going to be staying in a flat. That's the response you get, right? Because you're not really incenting him. You're trying to educate him on something which he doesn't really care about. He knows milk is good, but he says, I'll get milk from Mother Dairy. He doesn't care where that is coming from. So what we ended up doing was, we realized that if India is the largest producer of milk, clearly we have the largest number of cows, which clearly makes us the largest producer of cow dung. So if cow dung is the thing that we have in abundance, why don't we use cow dung to produce electricity? And so that's what we incented these farmers to come here and start bringing their cow dung to our gobar gas plant, which then makes 200 cattle worth of gobar, makes enough electricity, about 10 kVA, to run this whole center. Now the incentive here is, that these people come here, dump the gobar, make the electricity. So what's in it for them? Well, the money that we save, about 10 to 12,000 rupees a month, goes back as incentives to their wives. It makes sense. It'll run. So we've got this running for the past 2.5 months, and hopefully we'll be able to scale it up. Now the bigger problem is, how do you scale it up? Well, once you've got buy-in for 200 people is when you can go up to 2,000 people, but you can't start off with that, and that's been the biggest challenge. So having said that, once you've got these things in place, then we, of course, get solar panels and the windmills, which is yet to be tested, but this is the future plan. So having said that, we've got a whole working ecosystem in 3 villages right now, 3 village clusters right now. We look at typically a 5 to 10 village cluster, and we target about 200 to 300 women, and then, of course, the whole ecosystem in that place. Fortunately, we got about 500,000 students who are enrolled and registered with us. London Business School is doing a case study on HarVa, and they have a program in which they're doing 3-week entrepreneurship programs. So we're able to get these students past that stage so they're able to access the rest of the world opportunities, which they otherwise would never have. In a sense, the business model that I have is really about making things work in unison, and one thing drives the other. Because no matter how good a feeling I have, no matter how much I want to give back to the society, it will not make sense if I just go there on a weekend, do something, then I come back. So I need to send something and do something sustainable. So having said that, I've been always, now I've become a renegade when I look at these old sayings and things. So you've read the old Chinese proverb, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime, throw it out of the door. I don't think it makes sense anymore. Because today what's happening is the government is trying to do skill development. And they do skill development of, let's say, teaching him how to fish, and then they send him off to Thar Desert. The guy's thinking, well, there is no pond, there's no water. Where do I fish? Which is the actual problem, right? Not only that, it's not addressing the problem of rural to urban migration, because then where would he go? He'd go where the pond is. And what is most of the skill development doing these days? It's really about computer education. So basically, what we need to do is go the socio-capitalistic way. Not only do you teach him how to fish, you go to his village, dig a pond, fill it with rain-harvested water, culture fish, teach him how to fish, and then you buy it back from him.